Welcome to a journey into one of the most unforgettable dystopian visions of 1980s cinema. In this video, we're diving deep into 30 mind-blowing facts you didn't know about Escape from New York, John Carpenter's gritty, futuristic masterpiece that redefined the antihero archetype and captured a generation's fear of political collapse and urban decay. From James Cameron's early VFX wizardry to Kurt Russell's radical reinvention as Snake Plissken, we'll explore the wild inspirations, behind-the-scenes secrets, and creative gambles that helped turn this film into a cult classic that still influences pop culture today. Whether you're a hardcore fan or discovering it for the first time, this countdown is packed with Easter eggs, cinematic trivia, and deep cuts that will blow your mind. Buckle up. It's time to escape into the legacy of one of the most iconic films in sci-fi history. Inspired by Watergate and Vietnam, one of the most intriguing aspects behind the creation of Escape from New York is the sense of disillusionment that John Carpenter felt in the 1970s. He wrote the script in the mid-70s, a time when the Watergate scandal and the lingering shadows of the Vietnam War had taken a toll on the collective trust in government. Carpenter's frustrations over political deception and social upheaval channeled directly into the film's cynical, anti-authoritarian narrative. Instead of delivering a clean-cut hero who restores hope, he concocted a hardened protagonist who reflects a society that's lost faith in its leaders. By weaving those sentiments into a dystopian vision of a walled-off Manhattan turned into a maximum-security prison, Carpenter gave the film a haunting resonance that still feels relevant today. His script was so dark and unapologetic that it captured the imagination of audiences who felt disenchanted with traditional power structures. So, in essence, Escape from New York not only entertains, but also stands as a cinematic critique of the era's political climate. Influence from Death Wish. Another key ingredient that shaped Escape from New York was the gritty portrayal of New York City in the 1974 Charles Bronson film Death Wish. Carpenter was taken with how that film depicted an urban jungle teetering on the brink of total collapse, an atmosphere that felt like a stepping stone to a near-future dystopia. Carpenter didn't want to create just any dark cityscape. He wanted Manhattan to be a place so far gone that it was beyond saving, the perfect den for criminals and outcasts. Death Wish had already primed audiences for a vision of crime-infested streets, so Carpenter took that concept and pushed it to an extreme, imagining a scenario where crime reached such a critical mass that there was no choice but to convert the entire island into a prison. This blend of realism and hyperbole lent Escape from New York a dangerous edge, as if it were merely one big leap away from the gritty realities already portrayed in Death Wish. Harry Harrison's novel as a spark. Though Carpenter drew heavily from real-world anxieties, the spark of inspiration for sending an anti-hero into a dangerous, lawless zone also came from the science fiction realm. He cited Harry Harrison's novel Planet of the Damned as a partial blueprint for the toughest guy goes to the worst place premise. In Harrison's book, a strong protagonist is sent to the universe's most perilous planet, testing physical and mental endurance. Carpenter borrowed that concept and translated it into a grim future where Manhattan is essentially the worst planet imaginable, brimming with criminals instead of aliens. This fusion of dystopian sci-fi ideas with real-world cynicism resulted in Escape from New York, carrying both a futuristic vibe and a raw sense of immediate danger. It's one reason the film stands out among other genre fare, because it manages to feel simultaneously like a worn-down reality and a bold science fiction scenario. Script deemed too dark. Initially, when Carpenter first wrote the script in 1974, it was considered a tough sell. Studios saw it as too bleak, violent, and unconventional. Back then, audiences weren't as accustomed to hardcore anti-heroes, so the notion of a hero who's basically a convict with questionable morals made it a tricky pitch. Hollywood wasn't quite ready for the unrelenting negativity and aggression the script contained. It took Carpenter's success with Halloween in 1978 to prove he could score a major hit, and that boosted his credibility, ultimately paving the way for Escape from New York to get the green light. By the time it finally went into production, times had changed a bit, and the world was more receptive to darker, edgier stories. Largest budget for Carpenter. At a cost of around $7 million, Escape from New York was John Carpenter's biggest budget up to that point. While $7 million might not seem like much by today's standards, especially for an action-heavy sci-fi film, it was a substantial jump from Carpenter's earlier work. The production utilized every cent effectively, from building elaborate sets in St. Louis to crafting realistic costumes and paying for the top-tier talent, including established names like Lee Van Cleef and rising stars like Adrienne Barbeau. Though funds were still limited relative to Hollywood's usual big guns, Carpenter had enough resources to bring his dark, futuristic city to life. The film's success also demonstrated that smaller budgets needn't hinder big imagination as long as creativity, passion, and collaboration lead the way. Shot mostly in St. Louis, despite being titled Escape from New York, almost the entire film was shot in St. Louis, Missouri. A massive fire had left parts of the city looking rundown, so it provided a ready-made post-apocalyptic urban setting without requiring extensive sets or CGI. Getting permission to film in actual New York was notoriously difficult and expensive, especially for large-scale nighttime shoots. They did manage a single shot in New York, that iconic scene on Liberty Island. But if you look closely at the gritty streets, the burned-out buildings, and the crumbling structures, you're actually seeing St. Louis in the early '80s. This gave the film a jarring sense of realism that simple set building might not have achieved. Liberty Island access. Although the majority of filming happened in St. Louis, the production scored a rare permission to shoot on Liberty Island for a few key shots. This was an unprecedented move, as the area's strict security and historical significance made it tough to secure filming rights. Carpenter and his team used the location to establish authenticity, reminding viewers that this prison city was actually the Manhattan they knew, now transformed into a towering monument to societal breakdown. Even though it's brief, those scenes at Liberty Island ground the film, bridging the gap between fictional dystopia and the real-world landmark. It's a fascinating fusion of cinematic fantasy and actual American symbolism, letting you feel the eerie sense that this might be a glimpse into a dark, possible future. James Cameron's early work, before he was the legendary director of The Terminator, Aliens, and Titanic, James Cameron was just a young and hungry special effects enthusiast. He worked on Escape from New York as a special visual effects photographer, crafting the matte paintings that recreated the New York skyline inside a futuristic prison setting. Cameron was part of a small team using every trick in the book to make those paintings believable. He helped transform a place like the San Fernando Valley into Carpenter's dark Manhattan. It was a modest gig that allowed him to hone his craft, build industry connections, and eventually catapult into becoming one of Hollywood's most groundbreaking directors. It's fun to think that one of the earliest glimpses of Cameron's genius lies within the moody visuals of this dystopian flick. Innovative wireframe graphics. The film's budget constraints led to ingenious solutions. In 1981, actual CGI was incredibly expensive and time-consuming, so Carpenter's team had to improvise. They built a physical model of Manhattan, painted it black, and placed strips of bright reflective tape along the edges of the buildings. Then, they filmed it under specific lighting conditions to create a wireframe effect. This footage was later composited to look like the glider's onboard computer display, showing Snake Plissken an aerial view of the city. The result was a stunning, futuristic-looking sequence that felt cutting-edge at the time, even though it was all done through old-school practical methods. It's another testament to how constraints can foster creativity, and that resourceful spirit remains an inspiration in visual effects today. Mork and Mindy prop reuse. Hollywood is often a place of recycling and repurposing props. After filming, the president's escape pod, an egg-shaped craft, didn't just gather dust in some warehouse. It was reused as Mork's updated egg ship in the final season of Mork and Mindy, starring Robin Williams. Suddenly, the same futuristic prop that once saved a president in a dystopian future found a comedic second life in a sitcom about an alien living on Earth. Years later, it appeared in promotional events and was eventually auctioned off for a sizable sum, becoming a cherished piece of cross-genre memorabilia. This quirky bit of trivia highlights how Hollywood's creative economy thrives on reusing items that might otherwise be scrapped, giving them new narratives along the way. Set reused for Blade Runner. In a frugal and inventive move, the model of the city built for Escape from New York found a second life shortly thereafter. It was repainted and used for the groundbreaking science fiction film Blade Runner, 1982. This kind of resource sharing was common, especially among sci-fi productions that needed large-scale futuristic sets or cityscapes. Considering Blade Runner went on to become a seminal work in the cyberpunk genre, it's fascinating to think some of its visual DNA traces back to Carpenter's dystopian Manhattan. It's a testament to how these film universes, although separate, can sometimes share literal structural elements. X rating. Avoided. Like many boundary-pushing films of its time, Escape from New York initially raised the alarms of the MPAA for its gritty violence. The original cut apparently contained enough gore and brutality to nearly earn it an X rating, which would have severely limited its release. Carpenter and the editors made strategic trims, removing a few excessively gory frames, to bring it into R territory. Even then, the film feels raw and intense. This rating dance was typical for edgy action or horror directors of that era, who often had to juggle creative expression with the practical need for a rating that wouldn't undermine commercial success. The result is a film that retains its tough exterior while still meeting the distribution standards of the time. Kurt Russell's casting battle. Believe it or not, Kurt Russell was not the immediate choice for the role of Snake Plissken in the eyes of the studio. They wanted action regulars like Tommy Lee Jones or Chuck Norris, big names already associated with tough guy roles. But Carpenter saw something special in Russell, who was mostly known for wholesome Disney movies. Carpenter believed Russell could break the mold and channel a gritty toughness that audiences wouldn't expect. Their creative partnership had been building since Elvis, 1979, and Carpenter was confident Russell could deliver the snarling anti-hero energy they needed. This decision ended up redefining Russell's entire career, proving he could play much more than a charming, kid-friendly star. Russell's Disney image transformation. To say Kurt Russell shocked viewers is an understatement. People who knew him from The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes or That Darn Cat were utterly stunned to see him as a hardened criminal with a gravelly voice, a leather outfit, and an iconic eye patch. This role became a statement piece, showcasing his versatility and willingness to dive into intense, edgy territory. Russell's performance as Snake Plissken, complete with that drawling "Call Me Snake" line, gave him a rugged, no-nonsense aura. This transformation highlighted how one bold role can completely flip an actor's public persona. It also proved that taking risks can pay off in Hollywood, setting Russell on a new path of roles that accentuated his range. Snake's Eyepatch was Russell's idea. The Eyepatch might be one of the most memorable visuals in Escape from New York, and that's all thanks to Kurt Russell. During discussions with Carpenter, Russell proposed adding the patch because he felt it would give Snake an immediate sense of mystery and danger. Carpenter, always game for striking visuals, agreed instantly. Interestingly, Russell had to juggle different Eyepatch versions for different scenes. For action-heavy moments, he used a custom patch, allowing partial peripheral vision so he wouldn't bump into everything on set. For close-ups, they used a normal opaque patch to maintain that dark, imposing look. The Eyepatch became such a part of Snake's identity that you can't imagine him without it. Real-life Snake. Plissken. As if the character name Snake Plissken wasn't cool enough, it's actually taken from a real person Carpenter once met in Cleveland, though the real Snake was apparently very different from the cinematic version. Carpenter admitted that he was drawn to the edgy, rebellious quality of the name, which seemed perfect for a hardened, post-apocalyptic antihero. While the real individual didn't inspire the film's plot or personality traits, the borrowed name gave Carpenter's protagonist an extra layer of authenticity, like a living urban legend. It also suggests a sense of rebellious swagger that fits the story's grim environment, helping cement Snake Plissken's place as one of the great cinematic anti-heroes, Jamie Lee Curtis's cameo. Though uncredited, Jamie Lee Curtis lent her voice to the opening narration, reminding viewers that Manhattan has become a maximum security prison in the future. Having starred in Carpenter's Halloween, Curtis was already a valued collaborator, and her calm yet ominous voice perfectly set the stage for this menacing future. It's a subtle appearance, and many viewers had no idea it was her for years, but it adds an extra touch of cinematic history, tying together Carpenter's universe of iconic horror and sci-fi influences. It's also a prime example of how directors often keep a close circle of talent they trust for various smaller tasks that still carry significant impact. Donald Pleasence's backstory. The late Donald Pleasence, who portrayed the president in the film, brought his own nuanced approach to the role. Having worked with Carpenter on Halloween, Pleasence liked to dig deeper into his characters even in a pulpy action setting. He created a personal backstory that imagined the president as weak, somewhat sheltered, and ill-prepared for crisis. That internal logic informed Pleasence's performance, making the president more than a cardboard figure in distress. You can see subtle hints of fear, insecurity, and moral compromise throughout the film. This layer of complexity helped elevate the storytelling beyond generic action tropes, ensuring that even side characters had believable motivations. Pro wrestler Ox Baker's role. Carpenter needed someone truly intimidating for the gladiator-style fight, so he recruited professional wrestler Ox Baker to portray Slag, a hulking opponent for Snake. Wrestling fans at the time instantly recognized Baker's towering frame and menacing persona. During rehearsals, Baker's real-life rough style made Kurt Russell slightly apprehensive about potential injuries. Russell famously resorted to a gentle tap in the groin, his humorous way of signaling Baker to lighten up. It's a moment that underscores the interesting collisions of worlds in filmmaking. Professional wrestling meets cinematic fight choreography. Their battle in the film stands out for its rawness and unpredictability, reminding viewers that Escape from New York isn't afraid to get primal. Real baseball bat stunt. In that same gladiatorial face-off, Snake is forced to wield a baseball bat studded with nails against Slag. Despite safety measures, including a padded neckpiece for Baker, the stunt still involved heavy swings. Russell had to carefully time his blows to avoid real damage. The tension on set was palpable, as one wrong move could have led to a painful accident. Yet this authenticity shows up on screen, contributing to the film's gritty, visceral feel. Watching Snake smash a nailed bat against a towering wrestler in a chaotic ring is one of the film's most memorable sequences, highlighting both the raw desperation and the survival instincts that define Snake Plissken. Bank robbery scene cut. In an extended cut that never made it into the theatrical release, there was an entire sequence showing Snake robbing a high-security bank. This scene would have explained his arrest and how he ended up being blackmailed into rescuing the president. Test audiences reportedly found the bank robbery confusing and felt it delayed the core premise of the story. Carpenter, always sensitive to pacing, decided to remove it. Yet fans who stumbled upon special edition DVDs or watched specific re-releases discovered that missing puzzle piece. While it adds intriguing context to Snake's criminal background, many still prefer the film's in media res approach, letting Snake's legend unravel organically. Novelization added depth. In the 1981 novelization by Mike McQuay, fans found additional storylines and character expansions that the film didn't have time to include. This included the bank robbery scene and a backstory on how Snake lost his eye. It also explored more about Bob Hawke's family situation, particularly his son trapped somewhere in Manhattan. Novelizations in that era were a unique way for fans to dive deeper into the cinematic world, especially when home video releases weren't as comprehensive with extras. For many devoted viewers, the novel offered an expanded universe, a chance to spend more time with Snake Plissken, discover new layers of the story, and imagine what the film might have been had there been no time or budget constraints. Russell's Patriotism altered a scene. In one draft of the script, Carpenter planned for Snake to flick his cigarette directly in the president's face near the end of the film, showcasing his utter contempt for authority. Russell, who felt it was a step too far, especially given the president's symbolic role, suggested they adjust the action. Instead, Snake tosses the cigarette in the president's general direction, preserving the rebellious vibe but removing any explicit disrespect for the office itself. The compromise satisfied both parties. Carpenter kept Snake's edgy attitude, and Russell honored a certain patriotic boundary. It's a tiny detail that encapsulates the push and pull of collaboration, where small changes can subtly shape how an audience perceives a character's moral code. Isaac Hayes' art car. One of the film's most visually arresting elements is the Duke's 1977 Cadillac Fleetwood. Adorned with huge chandeliers on its hood, it oozes bizarre opulence in an otherwise crumbling wasteland. Isaac Hayes, the legendary singer and composer of the theme from Shaft, played the Duke with a regal menace. The car itself is sometimes credited as cinema's first art car, an imaginative piece of rolling artwork that goes beyond normal customization. The chandeliers were a symbol of the Duke's self-proclaimed royal status within the prison city. Seeing them bob and sway through dark, graffiti-strewn streets served as a sharp contrast, turning heads both in-universe and among moviegoers. It's now a piece of cult film memorabilia that fans reminisce about when they talk about the movie's unique sense of style. Carpenter's synth score. John Carpenter didn't just direct Escape from New York, he also composed its iconic synthesizer-driven score, a hallmark of many of his films. While synthesizers might be commonplace now, in the early 1980s they were still considered cutting-edge. Carpenter's pulsing, minimalist soundtrack provided a cold, moody vibe that perfectly underscored the tension and danger Snake faces at every turn. The music's electronic rhythms became an instant signature, resonating with viewers who were hungry for something that felt futuristic, yet sparse. Over time, Carpenter's synth-based compositions have influenced countless musicians and become a defining feature of his directorial brand. The Escape from New York soundtrack, in particular, is praised as one of his greatest musical efforts, enhancing the film's dystopian atmosphere. Stephen Ford's cameo. Some viewers might not realize that Stephen Ford, son of former President Gerald Ford, appears in the opening scene. He plays one of the Secret Service agents desperately trying to break into the cockpit of Air Force One. It's a fleeting moment, but a fun fact once you realize who he is, adding a whimsical layer of life imitating art. The cameo also speaks to how diverse the casting can get for even the smallest roles in such a film. For Ford, it was a quick step into Carpenter's Dystopia, one that ironically involves a fictional president in mortal danger. Director name-dropping, John Carpenter, a genre fan at heart, dropped little Easter eggs into the film's script by naming minor characters after directors David Cronenberg, George A. Romero, and Don Taylor. It's a sly tribute to his filmmaking peers, especially Cronenberg and Romero, who were also known for exploring horror and dystopian themes. In Escape from New York, these name drops might pass unnoticed unless you're specifically looking, but they show Carpenter's playful respect for the community of directors pushing the boundaries of genre cinema. In a film so rich with references to real-world paranoia and futuristic dread, these nods serve as a reminder that Carpenter was operating within a vibrant tradition of rebellious, boundary-pushing filmmakers. Metal Gear Solid inspiration. Perhaps one of the clearest indications of the film's long-lasting cultural impact is its influence on Hideo Kojima, the visionary creator of the Metal Gear video game series. Kojima has openly acknowledged Escape from New York as a huge inspiration, right down to naming his stealth action protagonist Solid Snake. Furthermore, in Metal Gear Solid 2, the main character briefly goes by the alias Iroquois Plissken, another direct homage to Snake Plissken. This cross-pollination between cinema and video games shows that Carpenter's edgy, post-apocalyptic hero resonates far beyond movie screens. For many gamers, the discovery of this link is a thrilling reminder of how one seminal film can influence creative minds across all kinds of media. Cloverfield's poster. Nod, J.J. Abrams, known for his knack for mystery and spectacle, also drew inspiration from Escape from New York when creating the marketing for Cloverfield, 2008. The Escape from New York poster, which famously depicted the severed head of the Statue of Liberty in a decaying city street, became a direct influence on Cloverfield's teaser imagery. Abrams even admitted he loved that haunting visual and wanted to replicate its sense of dread and shock. Though the scenes play out differently in both films, the cinematic language of a toppled Statue of Liberty as a symbol of New York's downfall continues to captivate modern audiences. It's another testament to Carpenter's lasting ability to spark imaginations decades later. Escape from Earth concept. Finally, after Escape from New York and its sequel Escape from L.A., 1996, Carpenter and Kurt Russell briefly toyed with the idea of a third entry, Escape from Earth. This hypothetical storyline would have had Snake fleeing an entire planet in the throes of cataclysm, an escalation of scale that might have been wild to behold. However, given that Escape from L.A. underperformed both critically and financially, the studios weren't eager to fund another sequel. As a result, the Escape series ended at 2 installments. Still, fans have been left to speculate what high-stakes cosmic escapade Carpenter and Russell could have conjured. Even without a third film, the character of Snake Plissken endures as a cult icon, and the notion of him escaping an entire planet remains an enticing what-if scenario in the annals of unmade Hollywood projects. And there you have it, 30 fascinating glimpses into the wild world of Escape from New York, each one adding another layer of intrigue to a film that dares you to imagine a grim future where criminals rule a prison city and a lone anti-hero must navigate the chaos. This movie stands as more than just a 1980s cult classic. It's a time capsule of political disillusionment, guerrilla filmmaking ingenuity, and cinematic risk-taking that still resonates. The film's blend of grim aesthetic, sardonic humor, and iconic characters has carved out a permanent place in pop culture history. As each generation rediscovers this riveting tale of a lawless Manhattan, Escape from New York continues to prove it was never just about leaving a walled city behind. It was about breaking free of a system that had lost its way. So, if you've yet to make the journey through its shadowy streets, cue it up, dim the lights, and immerse yourself in Carpenter's darkly enthralling vision. Just be careful you don't end up stuck there for good.